Good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago. I am Matthew Gibbs, and thank you for joining the Ministry of Education for this afternoon's media conference. This afternoon, the Minister of Education will be taking Trinidad and Tobago through the phased reopening process of schools for the academic year 2020-2021. So I now hand over to the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Matthew. Good afternoon to members of the executive of the ministry, PS, acting CEO, and members of the media who are present with us, also members of staff who are in the room and those who are viewing and listening. In March 2020, Trinidad and Tobago, like 189 other countries of the world, entered a situation where our schools were closed due to COVID-19. Since then, the education system has been operating online, and in September of 2020, we would have, at that point, been aiming to go back to school in a blended format. However, 2 weeks before the opening of school, the Prime Minister had to insist that we not come out face-to-face because of the trajectory of the COVID-19 pandemic in Trinidad and Tobago at that time. So, from September 2020, schools were online, and the preparations, of course, were made for students who could not get into the online environment. And we have been operating that way throughout term one, very challenging term for teachers, parents, and students. And we continued that way into January of 2021. However, what we have facing us is the fact that terminal examinations for our primary school students and our secondary school students are coming up in 2021. In 2020, these were entered into under COVID-19 restrictions, and we had a situation where our CSEC and CAPE students came out from July 2020, and the SEA students would have been out to school in August, and thankfully we were able to carry off both the CSEC, CAPE, as well as the SEA examinations. At this point, we are facing, again, another series of examinations coming up in 2021, and the difference is that our secondary school students have not been out to school. I would tell you that around the region, many schools have been operating, and it puts us in a unique situation because our secondary school students do have practicals, SBAs, internal assessments that must be completed for the requirements of the CXC examination body. And therefore, it necessitates that we take a look now at how we do a phased reopening of school. We have been speaking to this for some time now. Since November of 2020, the ministry would have been in talks with stakeholders, looking at how we would progress this phased reopening. And so I want to thank all of the stakeholders who would have made their inputs, the officials at the Ministry of Health, who also would have given us their input on the best way to approach this. And I want to also thank the citizens because at this time, our COVID numbers have not ballooned to the point where we are not able to even contemplate a phased reopening. So I will proceed now to just outline how we intend and propose to go about this. Trinidad and Tobago has entered into the second term of academic year 2020-2021. And examination dates for the SEA and CXC examinations, CSEC and CAPE, have been finalized. In order to ensure that students of forms 4 to 6 who have school-based assessments to complete for CXC exams and students of Standard 5 who are preparing for SEA have the best chance of success in these examinations, a phased approach to physical reopening for these students only has been approved. The ministry takes this opportunity to outline how this process will be facilitated. Secondary schools. Secondary schools will reopen on February 8th, 2021 for forms 4 to 6 students only using a hybrid system. The hybrid system entails online classes for teaching to continue as far as possible, students to report to school for the completion of practicals, SBAs and internal assessments, physical teaching classes to be held only where absolutely necessary. For primary schools, at the primary school level, Standard 5 students only will return to their physical classrooms at the start of Term 3, which is April the 12th, 2021. Substitute teachers will be assigned to primary schools where required to assist in supervisory functions and monitoring of students to ensure compliance with protocols. General operations for all schools. Entry protocols to be enforced must include the wearing of school uniform. Masks must be worn at all times except for the purpose of eating and drinking. Hand washing, temperature checks, collection of contact tracing data in the case of visitors to the compound, and we are asking that schools keep visitors to the very minimum. Schools must have a designated quarantine area, and students who display flu-like symptoms should be assigned to the quarantine area to await pickup. Teachers, health and safety officers, security officers, or staff may identify these students to the principal. Schools must follow specific safety protocols in the following circumstances, and these are further elaborated on in the complete guidelines booklet that is available now to all stakeholders and the schools. Staff or student displays of flu-like symptoms, there are specific protocols for that. Staff or student tests positive for COVID-19. A staff or student is identified as a primary contact of a person who has tested positive for COVID-19. Medical clearance is required for staff or students to re-enter the school population after being suspected or confirmed to have contracted COVID-19. Medical clearance is required for staff or students to enter the school population if another medical condition, for example, allergies, is causing the display of flu-like symptoms, which would result in being barred from entry to the school compound. All of these circumstances have clear protocols that are outlined in the guidelines booklet that has been provided. Other measures: 6 feet distancing must be enforced in teaching spaces. No whole school assemblies to be held. Breaks, including lunchtimes, should be staggered. Students should be allowed to eat at their desks in classrooms to avoid congregation where necessary. Sharing of materials such as books, stationery, snacks, or sanitizers among or between students should not be permitted. Schools are authorized to operate during normal school hours. Parents are obligated to inform the school if students begin displaying flu-like symptoms at home or if students have been identified as primary contacts. Schools will be provided with the complete guidelines for physical reopening, and these should be carefully adhered to. Schools should make a practice of repeating safety guidelines multiple times during the school day as a reminder to staff and students of the protocols to be kept. And these could also be used as sanitization breaks and reminders for students to use their personal hand sanitizers. Schools should ensure that parents are apprised of the safety protocols and procedures in operation and enlist their support in reinforcing same with their children. The Ministry of Education has prepared guidelines in nugget packages, and these will be circulated on social media, and they will also be available for download should schools or parents feel the need to download them to post them in different areas to remind staff and students of the protocols. The Ministry has established an Education District Health Unit that will comprise a team of 1 doctor and 14 nurses. The Education District Health Unit will operate as follows. Each school district in Trinidad to be assigned 2 district nurses with direct responsibility for being the liaison between the schools and the relevant units of the Ministry of Health to facilitate and expedite communication between principals, supervisors, and the Ministry of Health. Tobago will also make their arrangements. The Education District Health Unit will facilitate medical clearance for the entry or re-entry of students to schools where necessary. The unit will also have responsibility, in collaboration with the Health and Safety Unit of the Ministry of Education, for ensuring that arrangements are in place at schools for COVID-19 protocols to be enforced. So the elaborations on all of these measures are given in the complete guidelines, which would be available to schools, which has been distributed to stakeholders, and will also be posted on the ministry's website for further elucidation.
Thank you, Minister Gatsby Dolly. Members of the media, the floor is now open. Members of the media, please direct your questions one at a time, and please identify yourself by name and media house before you ask your questions.
Hi, good day. My name is Rihanna McKenzie from Newsday. Is there any indication as to when we can expect a full reopening of schools? Do you think these guidelines would be sufficient for a full reopening?
At this time, we are contemplating a phased reopening. It will all depend, certainly, even these dates that we are projecting here will depend on the numbers. Certainly, for the opening of primary school in April as projected, certainly we'll be still looking at the numbers. We are still very carefully guided by the Ministry of Health. So at this time, certainly we can't give a date for a full reopening of school, but what we are proffering is how we intend to move towards that.
Are we going to ensure that students do stay 6 feet apart? As in, they are mandated to wear masks, they are mandated to stay 6 feet apart, but when they see their friends who they haven't seen for a long period of time, how are we going to ensure that they do stay apart from each other? Right? That's one. Two.
I'll take one question at a time, thanks. So we are asking for parents to reinforce. Of course, at school, teachers will reinforce. For primary school, the situation is a little different because there are younger children, and that is why the desks, of course, will be placed at the appropriate distance to maintain that 6-foot head-to-head spacing, and the breaks will be staggered so that you don't have congregation of the students outside. And it really is a matter of the schools reinforcing, which is why we have asked the schools to have messages throughout the day. The parents also reinforce with their children. On the side of the ministry, we will enter an aggressive social media campaign as well, so that our children understand, they start to understand the behavior change that is necessary. So we will do all that we can to ensure that the opportunity for congregating is not there. There's also the guideline of asking parents in the complete document to drop the children off close to the start of school so that they're not in school early to be able to congregate and so on, where there's a lack of supervision. So we are asking that we do all of these things to reinforce and put measures in place so that you don't have assembly, you don't have a big lunchtime, so that you can have that. So, of course, we know that with primary school, it might be a little difficult to do it, which is why we are enforcing only for Standard 5, where it is absolutely necessary for them to come out for the preparation of the SEA exam, that we are asking that. And we are asking from even now parents to start emphasizing, and teachers in the online classes and so on, when they interact with students, to emphasize what needs to happen when they come out to school.
My second question, would the school feeding program be back on now that students would be at school?
Yes.
Yes, it'll be back on.
Okay. And only for the students, let me emphasize that, only for the students who are coming out. So we've asked the schools to supply the numbers for school feeding, also school transport. So we are working that out now for the students who will come out first.
Minister, good afternoon. This is Annalisa Paul from Trinidad Guardian. For children, Standard 5s and those Form 4s, the 6s, who are children at risk in terms of asthma and other health ailments, or what sort of arrangements are being made for those children to perhaps remain at home and also engage in that learning where they do not have to come in and possibly be exposed to the virus?
So we have broached that topic in the guidelines document for both teachers and students who might have that issue. And of course, that would have to be handled on a case-by-case basis, on a school-by-school basis. There are, however, circumstances which may not be able to be accommodated with respect to practical exams that have to be completed. However, in discussion with the secondary school principals, they have indicated, and tutors as well, they have indicated that they will structure their timetable, and we do ask them to do that, to structure a timetable to minimize the classes being in school at the same time. And of course, the social distancing makes it necessary, because now where you might have had 30 students in a lab, you may have to now have half of that number. So we are asking schools, and they are already on board with timetabling so that students do not accumulate in the school as much. And of course, we are asking that teaching remain online for now as much as possible, so that the opportunities for those who are at risk to have to come out would be as minimal as it can be.
Just perhaps an update on something, Minister. At the budget, the Minister of Finance announced that in a bid to expand connectivity, over 40,000 mobile hotspot devices will be distributed. Any sort of update on that?
The ministry is collaborating through iGovTT to do that, and the tenders for that should go out early next week.
Just one more, Minister. During the entire exercise, has any sort of assessment been done on the mental health of students over this duration where they would have had to, undergo this thrust to digital learning? Any sort of assessment or any sort of exercise to consider what the impact may have been on them?
We do have an officer from Student Support Services here. She may have to come around to the mic, or one of the a mic will be given to her. But just to indicate that Student Support Services, the officers, the guidance counselors, and the school social workers have received training and are delivering their services online. So I'll ask Ms. Robinson to elaborate on that.
President, good afternoon. Students received universal classroom in terms of the transition from the traditional face-to-face to the virtual transition. They were also exposed to social media and how to work with the social media, that they will use it in a beneficial way rather than a negative way. Parents were also educated, so we sensitize parents and students on the transition from face-to-face to a virtual and the implications that they may encounter.
Students who would have died by suicide on Friday, and we were particularly interested in finding out whether or not the Student Support Services Division has been receiving any sort of reports, if you all have observed any spikes or increases in such reports coming to you all, and our parents and students themselves reaching out for counseling, for help, because we know that the lockdown, the pandemic has had a different impact on children of the varying ages.
The incident is unfortunate. However, the student did not experience mental health issues. It is basically the use of social media, which we will continue to sensitize our students and the awareness as well as parents on how to use the social media. We have our hotlines out, and we have parents who are contacting Student Support Services via these hotline numbers, where they encounter challenges with their children, and or they too are stressful and are unable to cope, so that they could best manage their children. So that hotline number is utilized. All right. we have a lot, mainly coming from our secondary students, the general behavioral issues, and it comes back to the whole adjustment of students being at home, that social, the remove from the social atmosphere that they're used to in the school system, are creating a little instability in our children, and basically general behavior that our parents reach out to us, and the ability to cope with the stresses that come with COVID-19 and the adjustment to the education system.
Let me indicate at this time that in discussion with the EAP that provides services for the teachers, they have indicated that they have seen an increase in the number of teachers accessing their services, and what they accounted, as well as the fact that teachers are undergoing stress in the transition, they are also saying that because teachers are at home, they feel a little more empowered to come out and get the service because they're not at school, and nobody is asking them where you're going and why you're going to EAP, and they are coming in, and so they are seeing a lot more preventative measures being taken by teachers coming in and speaking and sorting out the issues of transition. And let me take the opportunity as well on behalf of the ministry to offer our condolences to the families and to the schools of these two young men. They were not referred to SSSD, so they were not receiving any individual attention through any referrals, either from parents or from teachers. But we know that even when, there is a stigma associated with persons referring to a unit that would give psychological help, and so we don't know the full circumstances of what would have been happening at home with the students, but certainly their deaths were both very, very tragic. And we offer our deep condolences to the families and the schools.
Minister, if I may again, at this point now, today we would have seen some local school principals issuing, cautionary statements to their parent bodies about this TikTok challenge known as the Blackout Challenge. And again, they're, urging parents and guardians at home, please keep an eye, especially on the younger kids. But like Mrs. Robinson, I think, just explained, we are seeing, secondary school students reacting differently. Mm-hmm. How concerned are you all and how alarmed are you all that this also as well could be something that our youngsters are looking at online? You may leave them for a few minutes and come back and find them, engaging in something that they don't even realize how dangerous it is to them.
The challenge of social media has been going on for years, of course, in school, out of school, physical school, online school. Even as a teacher in school, you have to be very careful about students and their cell phones. So many schools have instituted a no cell phone policy where you can't show your cell phone if you're in school and that kind of thing. Now, because the cell phones and social media is now deeply ingrained in how students are learning and will learn, it is a matter now of trying to train them to understand how to use the tool. And as SSSD would have indicated, they have been doing some of that. But as parents, we have to be careful. There have been various things, various challenges. And even on Facebook, you see all kind of different challenges. The over 40 challenge, the under 40 challenge, the 35 to 40 challenge, the mother challenge. So many different challenges. And as parents, sometimes we get caught up in those challenges too. Now, they are harmless to us. But for children, the challenge is a little bit different because they don't have the sense of danger that it's not fully developed yet. And so those challenges may seem like fun to our children, but this is not the first, and I don't think it will be the last, unfortunately, that could have disastrous consequences. So it is about us as parents keeping current as well. And certainly at the level of the ministry, if there are ones that come up to us, we can certainly do the service of identifying and putting out on social media to parents, look out for this. Because we may think it nothing. We may think that this is such a stupid thing. But to children, it may not be stupid. It may look like great fun. And, we see what the consequences could be. So as parents, we also have to keep current. It's our responsibility to understand what our children are looking at and what is available to them. So we also have to take a little delve into the areas that we may not be accustomed doing, but that is now a big part of our responsibility. So we have to attach ourselves, connect ourselves to, get involved there, and at the level of the ministry, certainly, we also have that responsibility to give parents a heads up when things are out there and we feel that it might be or lead to disastrous consequences.
That are quite fearful. What message would you like to give to parents today, as far as in encouraging them, or some sort of confidence from the ministry that they do not need to be fearful about sending their children back out to school?
We are in the throes of a pandemic, so I don't know that I would want to say to anyone that you should not feel anxious. Certainly, when we were generally, most people were at home and only essential staff were out, we were all grateful that they, even though they felt fearful, came out to work, because that is how the country continued to run. Police officers were out, even in ministries, account staff were out to make sure people got paid. And so this would have contributed to many people being able to stay at home and feel that sense of relief. But there were people always out here working. As an MP, I was out as well, ensuring that whatever aid I could bring in that time. So I don't think that we can get away from a feeling of anxiousness, especially where our children are concerned. But I can say that at the level of the ministry, we have done as much as we could to bring out the bigger children first, those who we feel would have a bit more responsibility and need to come out because they have to finish their CXC practicals to be able to complete the requirements for exam. So we are really looking at what is only emergency at this time. We have done this in the face of our numbers not ballooning to the extent that, we are very, very worried about the spread. So we are acting responsibly. The numbers are reasonable so that we can do this. We are only bringing out those that really have to come out at this time to complete their practicals. And we are, even in that circumstance, saying, do your teaching online once that is possible. If it is not, and you really have to have some face-to-face, okay, but we are also saying that you are distancing in the classrooms. We are also saying that you must wear masks, which is materially different from what happened in 2020. There were no masks enforced at that time, so you must wear your mask. We have further given guidelines for the cleaning operations, and we will speak to MTS as well on the basis of what we have put into these guidelines about the cleaning regimes that must take place. We are also, for the primary school students, recognizing the additional challenge and therefore bringing into bear the substitute teacher program, which will give the teachers supervisory help to keep the protocols. We have said that there must be entry protocols at the schools. At this point in time, any schools that do not have sinks, because many of them would have had because schools did open in 2020, any schools that don't have sinks, they are being outfitted right now. So that you come into the school, you wash your hands. We are asking parents to enforce the protocols. We are asking the schools to keep repeating it so that we get that behavioral change in the children. So we are doing the best we can. And all of this in the context of looking at what's happening in the world, in the region. Schools are open, even though the pandemic is with the countries. So we are saying that we are not jumping out on a limb. We are not being irresponsible, but we are only going as much as we can and given reason, time to see the effects. So secondary students come out on February the 8th, and we have time to see how that affects the system before we even contemplate bringing out the primary school students. So it is something that can bring angst. We understand that. I have a daughter in Form 5, and therefore she will be going out to school on February the 8th. So as a parent, I fully understand, how you feel about that. I will do my best to instill and inculcate in her that she has to wear her mask. She has to ensure that she has a sanitizer. She has to be careful, keep her distance. And so we are giving our students the best possible chance of fulfilling the examination requirements while still being as safe as possible.
There's been data coming out of, you're not hearing? Well, there has been data coming out of the ministry on how the progress of virtual schooling since March. There's been some concern about the accuracy of the data, most recently from MP Anita Haynes. Can we have some information on how this data is gathered and how will the ministry continue to monitor the progress of education with this new phased reopening?
With respect to attendance data, teachers would take the daily attendance. They take it for students who are online, and they take it morning and afternoon. For those who are on packages, because of course, since September, the ministry would have recognized the fact that not all students had access to personal devices. Some of them are still accessing the online environment through borrowed devices, their phones and so on. And so those who are able to come online, teachers take attendance that goes up to the usual channels and comes to the ministry. With respect to students who are on packages, that is collected every week. And so we look at those who are interacting on that in that way, and that data also comes forward to the ministry. So it's from the teachers, of course, to the supervisors, through district offices, and that comes forward to the director of school supervision, who then collates the figures.
Last question from me, Minister, and I know you would have touched on it in your explanation, but last month there was a case where 3 children, they were diagnosed with MIS-C, multisystem inflammatory syndrome. I know that will still be a concern weighing heavily on parents. Has this been something that the ministry would have considered as well?
What exactly?
The prevalence, well, the existence of this particular virus, MIS-C, that would have led to 3 children being warded at hospital, right? It's as a result of COVID-19. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the ministry would have paid any attention or would have considered it at all, but has it been something that you guys would have, looked at?
Not in any detail. Certainly anything that is of serious note health-wise, the ministry would take the advice on the Ministry of Health. So it hasn't been raised with us as a serious issue at this point in time, and we know that certainly if it becomes an issue that needs our attention, the Ministry of Health will do the needful, and we will be guided by their advice.
Okay, so we would like to say thank you to the members of the media and the Trinidad and Tobago public for joining the Ministry of Education this afternoon. Stakeholders are reminded that it takes a village for us to be able to transform education to where we need it to be for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. All of the information that was given today by the Minister of Education will be available after this media conference on all of the ministry's social media web pages and the ministry's website. Thank you for joining us, and do have a good afternoon.
The Base and 10 Global presents